Do you guys have beavers in England?
That is an excellent question. I was confidently going to tell you, no, we don't have beavers. And I looked it up because I knew this question would come up. And we do.
Oh.
We have beavers. I have never knowingly seen one, though.
Yeah.
I think we do have beavers, but maybe they live in Scotland. To tell you what we do have is otters.
Yes.
Which are they're like smaller, cuter, more polite beavers.
I love otters, yeah.
I may have seen a wild otter, possibly. I feel like maybe I have as a child. I have definitely seen a hedgehog.
You're getting away from the water now. Hedgehogs are land dwellers.
Yeah, but it's a small predatory mammal. I feel that's not a million miles away.
Okay.
I did once see a skunk outside my cousin's apartment in Vancouver. And I remember I have definitely seen raccoons eating out of a bin in Stanley Park. So in many ways, I'm a wild mammal expert.
I guess I have it in my head that the reason that the beaver industry became so huge in North America is because you guys just killed everything that you could possibly skin and wear. So all of a sudden, people from North America had to kill everything that you could skin and wear and send it to you guys.
To be fair, it was pretty cold here at the time.
Yeah.
So I think we did need the fur.
And maybe the Russians, I think of the Russians when I think of those hats, the beaver hats and all that. But
they have mink, don't they, the Russians?
They probably did. But again...
Or is that Minsk I'm thinking of? That's something different, isn't it?
That's not minks. Oh, plural for the mink. It's Minsk. What a difference letter placement makes, huh?
So earlier when I said I'm a wild mammal expert, actually I'm having my regrets saying that. Maybe I'm not a wild mammal expert after all.
I've never seen a beaver, but I have swum with otters very close. Oh. And they're not, I don't think they're quite as, I thought they were nice and they were yapping at me to say, hey, come swim with us. But I think I was close to where they wanted to go and they were probably barking at me. I think they're a little bit more vicious than they seem, but I love them. It's a beautiful animal.
I presume that swimming with otters, that is the main equivalent of swimming with dolphins in Miami or something, isn't it? That's what's available for the local tourist trade.
Yeah, it's not selling in the tourism industry so well, though. I think they bite, too. I think they probably bite.
I'm hungry.
Hungry for human flesh.
That's an entirely different film. Hello and welcome to the Two Reel Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I am Andres Lorente. And on the Two Reel Cinema Club, we always take a look at a couple of films, usually a new one and an old one. Sometimes, maybe even this week, kind of two old ones, but... One's in the theaters or on the streaming services, and the other one is a little older than that. So we found them, and they're all about beavers. We don't always do films about beavers, but this is a double beaver show.
We do a lot of films about mammals, don't we?
Yes. We've done cats, donkeys, of course.
A lot of donkeys.
Lots of donkeys. So this week we watched...
dogs and their robots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those were animals. Yeah. Robot dogs. And dogs with robots. You're right. And sometimes we just talk incessantly, but today we're going to get down to business with it because we're going to be busy as beavers. We've watched...
Oh, I like it.
We've watched Hundreds of Beavers, literally, and also that's the name of a film. And we paired that with Beaverland, which also has a lot of beavers, but then again, it doesn't have many beavers. I loved it. It was a great pairing.
Cleverly wrong-footed there, yes. Yeah. Someone at work asked me the other day, what have you seen for your podcast lately? Anything you can recommend? And I started recommending Hundreds of Beavers to him.
Yeah.
And I got halfway through my recommendation when I realised, wait a sec, maybe this isn't a film that you should recommend to everybody.
Yeah. I agree.
But maybe why that is the case will become clear as we talk about it. So, Hundreds of Beavers, it's a super, super low budget, micro budget, unique, kind of lo-fi, black and white, physical comedy.
Yeah.
I was trying to kind of figure out what it is. It's like, I think the pitch is that it is The Revenant, but made by Buster Keaton.
Okay. Yeah.
Or failing that, it's imagine Looney Tunes. But after they played a lot of Super Mario Brothers.
Yes. And visually, it's not that far from Looney Tunes either. I think that's probably the most impressive thing about it.
I think it is their touchstone. So they made it for $150,000. So it is a black and white physical comedy. and it's basically entirely silent. There is a few words of mouth dialogue, but you could entirely miss it.
Yeah.
A few intertitles, but broadly, it's entirely silent. They shot it over 12 weeks, over 2 winters in rural Wisconsin in the snow. And it looks like one of those movies which is fun to watch, but must have been an utter nightmare to make. And everyone was utterly frozen. But made really cheaply. I read some interviews with the guy who made it, who's Mike Cheslick. It was all shot with a Panasonic GH5. It was a little camera that you could buy on Amazon.
Yeah.
All shot in 1080p. And he is a professional After Effects technician, I think. So he just added hundreds and hundreds of effects shots on his computer, composited them all in After Effects, and they made the whole movie for $150,000.
Brilliant.
So, shall I tell you the story that they managed to tell with $150,000?
I think you sort of just told it, and it just has hundreds of beavers in it. I think we can start the review.
So, in this silent, black and white, Buster Keaton-style slapstick comedy, Jean Kayak. Is it Jean or is it Jean? Jean, what do you think?
Good question. I think they're trying to go for the French-Canadian thing, so probably Jean, but...
Probably Jean. Okay, yeah, I'll buy that. He has a successful apple cider business at the beginning of the movie, singing and dancing, until beavers attack his kegs and cause an accident that destroys everything he owns in a fireball. And that kind of sets the tone for the movie. Yeah. So alone in the snowy wilderness, he is desperate for food and outwitted by every furry mammal that he encounters, all of them played by people in furry suits. Apparently they bought 6 beaver costumes for this movie. Yeah. They bought them from a Chinese website and then just stitched a few extra teeth on them, something like that. Yeah. So at last, after months near death in the wilderness, he begins to learn the skills and the lifestyle of the trapper. And he falls in love with the daughter of the man who runs the local trading post. How can he win her hand? Only, the trader tells him, by catching and selling him hundreds of beavers. But will Jean or the beavers win this particular battle?
Ooh.
Always end on a question.
Yeah.
Always end on a question.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and one question for me is, how many hundreds is hundreds of beavers? Because it seems to be very clearly 300, but he doesn't say, I want 300 beavers. He says hundreds of beavers.
He could have sold him just 200 beavers. He definitely over-beavered.
Yeah, he did. He did.
At the end of the movie. But I feel like we've overstepped the spoiler bell already.
Oh, sorry.
Before we spoil, and I'm not entirely sure that you can spoil because the joy of the film is sort of in the moment-to-moment of these extremely silly physical gags. Yeah. So I'm not sure that we can kind of spoil it badly. But before we spoil it a bit, my main take-home from this movie, I enjoyed it, but we watched it in front of the telly at home. You can rent it on Apple TV for $1.99 in the UK. They are going for the low-budget option. But I reckon this is a film that was made to be seen in a theatre.
Yes, probably
with a whole bunch of strangers in a darkened room.
Yeah,
because I reckon this film would probably be hilarious if you saw it in a packed cinema. Yeah, whereas it has so many ridiculous, inventive, clever, persistent calling back gags one after the other. Yeah, that I'm sure it would be side splitting to see it live with other people. But when you watch it in your own living room, it doesn't quite have the impact that it would on the big screen.
I agree.
You saw it on the big screen, didn't you? Am I right?
No, I tried to. So it was here for a while in the theater, and then for some reason, and this is a film that's been kicking around. It's listed as being released, I guess, in 2022. So I'm assuming it was made in 2021 or 20. You said 2 winters, so 2020 and 2021 or something like that, and then released by 2022. So we're now in 2025. So it's been out there for a couple of years, and then it came back for one night, and I don't know why, and I meant to go see it, but I think we had another engagement that night, so I regret not seeing it in the theater. It's sort of a muted experience if you're seeing it alone at home, I think. Because there's no one else
alone
left.
especially. Oh man, you have my sympathy.
You feel outnumbered by beavers when you're watching it all by yourself.
I mean, I think basically they toured it, didn't they? So I'm guessing that actually the filmmakers are taking either a print or a Blu-ray or a USB disc, stick or something like that with the movie, and literally touring with it one night at a time in different venues.
Yeah,
and that's probably the cleverest way to make money out of it.
Yes, I mean, there's so many things conceptually I love about it. I love the budget. I think it's fantastic. I think it's ridiculous to be spending tens of millions of dollars on films. I love the innovation, the inventiveness of it, the imagination, just the visual gags and the visual work is phenomenal. And I do love the way they're doing it. They're touring with that film and showing it to smaller audiences. And I think that's why it came back for one night, is I think someone associated with the film was pitching it and talking about it. So I love all of those things about it.
But then there was a big pause.
Yeah, well, that's why the pause actually said what I went on to say anyway. Spelled it right out, which is a good case for less dialogue, more visual storytelling.
Yes.
But on a podcast, a pause isn't necessarily good storytelling.
There are a bunch of great gags, and it's I don't know. We'll ring the spoiler bell in case I spoil any of those gags.
Well,
so why don't we?
Yeah,
we'll climb to the top of a rather deserted tower. What do you call those kind of wind towers that you probably see in the Midwest? They've got like a windmill on top, and you can see them from miles away. And are they pumping water or something? What do they do?
Yeah, I think they're windmills for pumping water. Or
okay, right. So we'll climb to the top of one of them and ring a spoiler bell. I should have done more research about the American Midwest, shouldn't I?
Scare off. At least you can scare off some of these beavers with that bell.
Entice the beavers. Right, here's the bell. So, it's one thing that's worth noting is, if for all that it's effectively a Buster Keaton film, and it's set during a historical period, but it also feels tremendously contemporary, because it feels a lot like a film that is stitched together out of memes.
Yeah.
It's very, very highly referential, this film. I started making a list of all the things that it refers to, and I sort of lost count, but my list included Jackass. There's plenty of Jackass in there. There's Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress in there. There is Grand Budapest Hotel in there. There's that Robert Redford meme of him nodding in the snow in the 1972 Sidney Pollack picture Jeremiah Johnson.
Love Jeremiah Johnson.
That is in there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reference to Clive Barker in there with his kind of story of people climbing on top of each other to form a giant in the Books of Blood. There's just this film is absolutely crammed with references, and that makes it feel a little bit like 2,000 TikTok videos that have been stitched together.
Yeah.
And some of those videos could have been stitched together in almost any order. So narrative is not the strong point of this film.
No.
It feels like a tremendously long sketch that could have been shuffled and still have the same effect.
Yes. And I think I would just quickly counter or add to what you're saying. I think all those references are not story, though. They're like nods to things, but they don't necessarily tell the story. So I think it's a shame. This film visually and in terms of its production is so original, and yet a lot of the storytelling is not even remotely original. It's stuff that we have seen again and again. So I think when you depend on references, you're basically admitting that you don't have a strong story to carry you through. Is it an hour and 48 minutes or something like that?
It is an hour.
It's not short.
Minutes.
It's not short.
I think it is probably a bit too long. There's a whole bunch of interviews with Mike Cheslick online, and many of them he says, people have told us that the film is too long, but I don't agree.
Oh.
I think it has to be this length.
Oh, really?
And I do wonder whether, if enough people start to tell you, this film is a bit too long, maybe there's a reason for it.
Oh, definitely.
But that said, you're never waiting very long for a gag, and there are no boring moments. It's utterly breakneck to the extent that one almost wishes that it was a little bit slower paced at times, because it's so gag. And the film feels almost a little bit like it's sped up. I'm sure they've manipulated the way that people walk and move.
Yeah.
But it feels a little bit like it's, the whole reel has been sped up right from the start.
Yep.
So it's constantly moving forward so quickly. And you're never waiting more than 15 seconds for another ridiculous, crazy gag or a callback.
Yeah, so I think as a result, sometimes I get sort of bludgeoned into this position where I kind of lose attention because too much is happening at once, and there aren't enough pauses. And maybe that's because I just have that kind of brain. I work a little slower. So I think, you're probably right. I think they did speed it up a little bit, which means it could have, at regular speed, this one could have been 2 hours and 10 minutes or 2 hours and 15 minutes, which definitely would have been too long.
Of all the recent films that it reminds me of, there's a little bit of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once in this film, I think, which has that similar kind of utter relentlessness. It has another kind of ADHD sort of feel to it.
Yes.
But this film lacks that sort of natural pause from Everything, Everywhere, All at Once of the bit of the story where they just stones on a cliff face.
Some settling in time, I guess.
Yes. There's it could maybe do with a little bit of variation in the pacing, but there's I can understand if you've made many gags, you want to try and get them all in, because it looks like every single one of them was paid for in blood. This must have been a very challenging film physically to make, because they really are out in the Wisconsin winter in knee-deep snow day after day after day. It must have been extremely difficult.
Well, they kill a lot of beavers, but maybe not enough darlings. Maybe they should kill more of their darlings in this film to tighten it up a little bit, make it a bit more reliably funny, I think. I have a question for you.
Yes. Yes.
Because this film gets going, and we enjoyed the first 30 minutes or so. I was laughing a lot. I thought it was great. And then, for me, this film feels like a short film that was sort of drawn out and turned into a feature film. And I'm sure just in the process of coming up with all these visual effects and stuff, they probably do have a short version of this film, and it may have started out as like a really tight 10, 15-minute film, and I think that would be brilliant. I find it very strange to extend it beyond it. An hour and a half would have been the very maximum to me, but to get into the high 140s, it just loses its energy far too soon. And then there's this weird moment where it's probably about the time that we thought it was starting to drag a little bit. That's when the title for the film comes on screen. Did you notice this? Yes. And I wasn't even sure if they were changing films right in the middle, because they don't put the full title, I don't think. They sort of just introduce the actors' names and maybe the director's room. And it was probably close to 30 minutes in before they announced the actors and the director. And
I checked my watch, and it's 35 minutes.
Is it 35 minutes? And it's almost... They almost give you the title, but I think Hundreds of Beavers comes much later, kind of at the end of the midpoint or the second end of the second act. So it just felt like I thought, are we watching a different film now? Because now you're showing me the titles. That was like the warm up film, and then here the real film happens. It's just a very odd thing, because it was right at the moment where I thought, oh, this film is either going to be amazing because it's been really funny these first 30 minutes, or something bad's going to happen. And I guess it does get more violent at that point, because his quest is more about, knocking off as many beavers as he can. But it's a very strange decision in the filmmaking.
The actual title, I think the title card, Hundreds of Beavers, is at 1 hour 15. Yes, I checked my watch again. So I'm guessing they thought it was pretty hilarious to have the credits 35 minutes in and repeated the gag. And a lot of the tone of this film is about callbacks, isn't it? Because he, for the main body of the film, as he's learning to be a trapper, he's going around setting up traps. And he even draws a map on screen, which is like a big clockwise circuit around the Wisconsin countryside. Yep. And he goes from one trap to the next, sees whether he's caught anything, sets it up again. And it's a little bit like the middle section of the film is a 40-minute training montage. Yeah. He learns to be a trapper, but we see every moment and every lesson. Yep. And some of them are hilarious and unpredictable and very funny. Some of them maybe are misses, but it's all paced so quickly that at least it never kind of flags. I would say the funniest gag, the gag that got the biggest laugh in our house, actually happens about halfway through, which is that he meets a trapper who is credited as Indian Trapper.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like probably, should we be calling that guy First Nations Trapper?
Maybe.
Something like that. I don't know. But anyway, and he has this horse who is played by a pantomime horse of two guys in a suit.
Yeah.
And the horse guy got the biggest laugh in our house. Everybody really chuckled at the horse because the actor who plays the horse is extremely po-faced as he's being stroked by the other actors.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were halfway through the film when we got our biggest laugh. So it held our attention all the way through.
Yeah. For me, though, the cycling through the trap line again and again, it does show this sort of, I guess it's showing a character arc, right? He's learning how to be a master trapper because the original master trapper has been taken by wolves.
Yep.
But it gets so repetitive that it kind of counters any arc whatsoever because he's going to end up kind of where he was before. There aren't many options. Like, he's not going to go off to some city and be some other character. This is his life. And he's going to get some food. And I think it's sort of, for me, it hints at the real, I'll say, problem with the film is that it's just too repetitive. There's the rule of 3 in cinema, which is so important, I think. And after you've done something 3 times, I don't think you can do it again and have any effect. So you got to kind of work quickly with those 3 opportunities you get. And he runs that trap line so many times, and it's more and more information, and it's not that different. And it just
the rule of 17.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a repetitive film. I don't think you can argue against that. And there are some funny things, but you start to get confused. Like, he was using feces to attract something.
Yes.
Was it the beavers? And then he was using castor oil for the beavers, which is, I guess, what they do. And castor is the French word in French for beaver. So castor oil, and in Spanish too. So I was very confused with that. What, he's giving beavers beaver oil in order to attract them? Cannibalistic beavers, I guess. And then the feces, he was using crap to attract something too. And then there were flies in the middle of a Wisconsin winter that he was tracking down too. It was just, there was a lot of information, but it was still kind of repetitive, and that made it kind of lag for me. This film, I hit my comatose mode at one point, where it's just like, okay, this is just too much. I'm just being dragged along like those dogs or that sled or whatever it is.
I mean, this the way they wrote the film was with just little index cards. So they had like a couple of pages of treatment.
Yeah.
But basically, it was just a big stack of index cards, and they would draw out the gags.
Yeah.
On the cards,
yeah.
And then sort of set the cards out in an order, and they would take the cards on set, and they say, "Well, we're going to film these 3 cards today."
Yeah,
and if they got the 3 cards shot, then that was a good day. And I guess as a result, the film does feel a little bit arbitrary.
Yeah.
One of the things that Mike Cheslick, the director, often references in the interviews that you can read is he talks about Super Mario, and not only does the film it co-opts some sound effects from Super Mario, so you get like a little Super Mario sound effect every time he knocks off another beaver.
Yeah, and
there's a count that's counting up in the top right hand corner of the screen. But also, I think he's kind of suggesting the very structure of it. It's about you have a limited set of skills, or you have a small repertoire of different special items. And you combine them in every possible way, and you work out every possible gag that you can do with every possible combination of them. So it does feel quite video gamey. Yeah. I think a little bit like Flow, which we watched the other week. I think this is further evidence of the way that video game thinking is going to influence the mode of storytelling for young filmmakers in the future. I think there's going to be more and more of it. Yeah. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's interesting to have a new way of telling stories, to have a new kind of paradigm. But this is what we've got out of it. It's not a bad film. It's certainly interesting.
I'm going to say it's a bad thing. It's not a bad film. I had very high hopes for this because visually I was so arrested every time I saw the trailer, and I thought this is gonna be good, and I went in with super high expectations. I don't like the idea of films becoming video games. I think they're just too different. Again, it's 2 different media, and I think it just it frightens me. It's actually frightening to me. Because when you think about it, a video game if you're playing a video game for an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes, that's probably not a very good indication. And it's just made for a completely different attention span. And it's something that I worry about with society in general, is that there's just no attention span anymore. So the idea that films would be based on the video game habits of young filmmakers it's troublesome to me.
Reading the comparisons with Buster Keaton, I thought I ought to do a bit of research this week. So I have not read the book Hundreds of Beavers because there isn't one.
But you can read the index cards, though.
There's just a stack of postcards. But realizing that I don't know much about the films of Buster Keaton, I thought I'd just sit down and watch a Buster Keaton film.
Oh, yeah.
So I watched The General. I don't know whether you've seen that.
I have seen The General, yeah.
Which is, I think it's going to be, it's 99 years old. I think it's 1929.
Wow.
And never having seen a Buster Keaton film, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. And I think I was expecting something a little bit more madcap and frenetic. Yeah. And in fact, the General, it's a relatively leisurely story. It does not race ahead. There is a large number of amusing physical gags, but it certainly doesn't feel hyperactive.
Yeah.
After you've watched Hundreds of Beavers, it feels pretty slow paced. Yeah. Buster Keaton does the same thing, I think, that we see in Hundreds of Beavers, which is that they undercrank the camera so everything moves along faster than normal.
Yeah.
And they take advantage of that for some funny gags, and and things things seem a little bit unreal, and there's a lot of clever acrobatics and people falling onto this or off that, or people doing some clever tricks. But it's decidedly leisurely compared to Hundreds of Beavers. I'm guessing that if Buster Keaton had watched Hundreds of Beavers, he would have understood it and laughed at it and enjoyed it. But I wonder whether he also would have felt like it was a little bit too much.
Probably, yeah. I think just time just seems to have sped up. So I think tastes have probably changed quite a bit as well. So I'm sure that if you showed this to a young person, not some 56-year-old grouchy man, they would be fine with it. They'd be taking it in stride, in tempo, and they would love it. But for me, it was, it's just too much. I need space. I hit this comatose moment where I just can't process anymore, and that's because I have probably the opposite of attention deficit disorder. So
attention excess disorder.
But I still end up with an attention deficit, though, right? That's the irony, is that I still come to the point where, I can't pay attention to this anymore because it's just too fast for me.
My children, who are certified teenagers, both agreed that this film was too long.
Yeah.
And they did chuckle a bit, but there was too much of it.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I could go 30 minutes on it. I think this is a 15 to a 20-minute film would be gold, absolute gold, because there's so much hard work. There's so much great visual stuff. It's so inventive, and yet I think it's too much of a good thing, and that's why I get so disappointed when thinking about it, because it had such potential. I think it just is too much. Oh. Wait, could it be that Hundreds of Beavers are just simply too many beavers?
If they'd shot about 60 beavers, now we'd be
there
talking.
You go.
Yes.
If this film was called 60 Beavers and no more, it's gold. It's gold. And you could do 60 beavers in 30 minutes.
This film is full of a lot of stuff. In amongst all of that stuff, do you think it might be possible that somewhere in amongst it, there might be a cliche?
Or two. Or hundreds, for that matter. I don't know.
Maybe we should phone the cliche Mounties and report any misdemeanors that we've spotted.
Morse code them to the scene now. How long would it take to call the cliche squad via Morse code?
It would be 3 weeks. It would be a man on a mule would take a letter, wouldn't he?
We'd be dying. We'd be drowning in cliches.
Well, that's been happening all year.
Cliche squad.
So I wrote here on my cliche squad summary. I wrote, I am full of admiration for the people who made this and then made it a success. But
yeah.
But I'm going to give them a bit of a pass insofar as this is not your usual feature film. It is unusual. They have worked very hard.
Yeah.
It has a very distinctive look and voice.
Yep.
It's not the norm. But my one question mark that I made in my notes is for a film that only features one woman.
Yeah.
Does that one woman really have to be a pole dancer? So, it doesn't mean I'm not sort of down on anybody who does do that. Good for them, well done. But it does feel just very slightly like this tremendously innovative, off the wall, crazy, unusual film still can't avoid perpetuating this pattern that women need to justify their time on screen through sex work.
Yes.
And I'm a little bit writing that down. I was worried, am I being a prude here? Or, or could we possibly have, am I barking up the wrong tree? I don't know.
No, not at all. I don't think so at all. I mean, this is a film with 4 characters, and they're all kind of caricatures at that. So she certainly is. She's the daughter of the trading post, I don't know, chief or whatnot, who basically he's spitting tobacco all the time unsuccessfully into a spittoon somewhere. He's kind of a caricature of what we think of as the Wild West tradesman, I guess. She's the butcher, so she takes care of she basically gets the pelts off the dead animals. And they should have. I love that because it could have been. It actually is in another film we've seen recently. Very grotesque.
Yes,
but she pulls the skins off, and of course there are these animal costumes complete with innards and entrails and all that. And it's quite lovely. But yeah, she's definitely. I think there's this automatic association. Oh, well, if there's a trading place, there must be prostitution there and stripping there and lots of alcohol drinking there, which is kind of a cliche. I mean, historically, it's probably kind of accurate, but I think to the point where in film it has become cliche, I think. Yes, I'm going to agree with you on that one. That was disappointing to me, too, that there's 1 woman, 3 men in the film, and none of them are particularly original characters, even though visually they're represented quite in an original fashion. It's lovely the way they've been drawn, but yeah, caricatures. Yeah, cliche, for sure. Yeah. For me, just the whole trading post culture and the characters there. There's this master trapper from whom he learns, he's just great at cutting things down and killing them and bringing all these massive sleds full of animal pelts to the trading post. And then the other one is just and it's very obvious because I guess he's an apple cider trader, but I think the film begins with this picking of an apple off of a tree, which is just, obviously biblical and something that we see in films so often to say, thus commences evil, or the apocalypse is nigh, something like that. So I was just a little taken aback by that, but I think, its cliches almost dwell more in just all the references, I guess. And as you mentioned, sort of the ideas that come from video games and other films and all that. But I would give a pass for the most part. I mean, I think, again, you're looking low budget. You can only afford to get 4 actors out in the Wisconsin winter, and they're the ones that are crazy enough to do it for little or no pay as well. So I guess you just draw the characters very broadly, and, the general story is there. It's something that, to a certain extent, maybe it has to be cliche because you just want a simple story that you can tell with no dialogue. And so they become reference points, I guess, those characters and that whole scenario of traders going to the trading post. So it's already out there in the cinematic canon, so it's kind of easy. So I would give them mostly a pass.
Yeah, mostly a pass. I mean, what's going to be interesting is what he does next. I think what these guys do next is is kind of the make or break, isn't it? If they make another black and white Buster Keaton movie, well, it may well still be interesting, and they'll probably get a bit more money to make it. But they might turn those skills to do something, different and extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what comes next, and there will be something next, won't there?
Yeah, and I think they've gotten some attention with this, and as I said, there's so much good stuff in there. I hope they continue to do their visual work, but I was wondering, if they get some dialogue and they can pay some actors and get a sound crew, that could change things very, very quickly, very dramatically. Yeah, because some of the shots are great. I love the shots when he's climbing up trees. They're just wonderful. Wonderful. Really just subverting gravity and what we expect on screen. It was wonderful in that way.
It's like it's really 2 steps between animation and live action, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
it almost feels at times like it's cutouts against a background or something, isn't it? It's almost like puppetry more than cartoonery.
Yeah,
cartoonery. That's not a word, is it?
It is now.
It is now.
Cartoonery. Oh,
right. Well, let's have a break while I go and fetch a dictionary and try and prove whether that is a word or not. We will try and warm up, having come in from the Wisconsin winter, and we will come back in a minute or two and talk about another movie that's packed with beavers, sort of, maybe. We'll come back and we'll talk about Beaverland.
for the Two Real Cinema Club family. This is a very timely sponsorship. Comes to us from Texas Landscaping Instruments, which used to be a big deal. I don't know if you remember, they made calculators when I was a kid.
They made Speak and Spell, didn't they?
Yeah. And, it might be the one that guy who ran for president worked for or owned at some point. Anyway, it turns out that they make, they also make computers, but they make basically everything. And now they bring us the Beaver. How perfect, right? The Beaver,
how timely.
Very timely. So the Beaver is this fantastic new wood chipper. And honestly, it's better than the one that I bought from Sunjo, buyer's regret. But regret not, Two Real Cinema Club listeners. The Beaver is a handsome, prosumer-grade wood chipper that looks like a beaver.
Does it look exactly like a beaver?
It looks as much as those beavers in Hundreds of Beavers look like beavers, right? It's kind of like a wood chipper in a costume. The tail of the animal is this wonderful solar panel that powers the beavers, hundreds of beavers power.
Genius.
It's an all-electric engine. No gas or oil, no castor oil, for example, is required. The rotating bidental cuspid blades chew through limbs up to 2 inches, or about 5 centimeters, like an adult beaver. And they look like the cuspids of an adult beaver. The entire device is encased in a mammal-friendly faux fur casing, and the head of the beaver covers the grinding mechanism to protect the device when not in use. The Beaver Belly is a bag that captures the fine mulch product suitable for compost or edging around the garden. There's no more lugging waste materials to a dumping grounds or throwing the waste material over the fence and into your neighbor's yard, hoping that they don't notice. The Beaver
I've never done that, by the way.
The Beaver comes with noise cancellation headphones. So when your neighbors complain about the 150 decibels of grinding and the previous refuse in their yard, you can honestly say, I didn't know anything and I don't know anything.
Oh, so the headphones are for you, not for the neighbors,
exactly. Right? See no evil, hear no evil. What is it? Yeah. The Beaver also offers classic grinding in the sharpened trunk style in a pencil function, which produces numbers 1 through 8 and carpenter's pencils, all the way up to the spear function for implements suitable for impaling neighbors who complain about you and your beaver. There is a disclaimer here. You can't actually put beavers or any other live or dead animals in the Beaver. Such practices are illegally banned in 49 states and Canada. Texas no longer has any known beavers and is coincidentally where the Beaver was developed and tested. See all of this for yourself at, this is a long website, the Beaver Grinder, not to be used on actualbeavers.com. Or check out the Texas Landscapes Instruments website, if you can find it. I don't think you can. If you can't find a beaver in Texas, you can't find this website.
Well, I must say, the garden could do with the tidy. And you may be able to hear the sound of chewing in the background as we come back for part 2. We have watched another film about beavers. We have watched literally 201 beavers this week. We have watched I've got numbers on my brain now. The 2014 documentary Beaverland, which I had never heard of.
Yeah,
it wasn't easy to find as well. Only available on Apple TV in the UK. Difficult to track down.
Yes. Where did we see it?
You're the one who chose this. Have you seen it before?
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I haven't. It's called Los Castores in Spanish. It's just called The Beavers in Spanish, but it's Beaverland in English. I don't know how I'd heard about it somewhere, and then I thought, there's no way I'm ever going to watch this film. And then when we started thinking about watching Hundreds of Beavers, I said, okay, I have heard of this film called Beaverland, so let's watch it.
And it is ideal comparison.
It actually
is amazing, really.
It was. It shocked me. And I thought, well, we're going to watch it because it's about beavers. It was just that simple. It's a film about beavers.
Remember, there's only so many things that you can say about beavers.
Yeah.
But between them, these two films have covered all of the bases.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, the guys who made Hundreds of Beavers may have seen this because they're about 8 years apart. I mean, it's old. It's 2014, but it's not terribly old. And
Yeah.
you have to figure that the guys who made Hundreds of Beavers are starting to think about that in 2020 at the latest, right? So
Yeah.
they may have seen it as inspiration.
I think it's very likely they've seen it, yes.
It's odd, though. It's listed in IMDb as a documentary and a Western, which makes no sense to me. It was directed by Antonio Luco and Nicolas Molina. Even the fact that even that there's one director is surprising, but that there are two directors is interesting. And then there's a screenplay by Luco, Molina, and Pablo Carrera, which I didn't see much evidence of a screenplay, but we have some interesting things to talk about.
Yeah. So for the very few people listening to the podcast who have not seen Beaverland, there can't be many of them, but do you want to tell us what the story is?
Everyone's seen Beaverland. I don't need to do a synopsis. Georgia and Derek are these young wildlife biologists, and they're listed as cast also. So, we're going to have to talk about how narrative this is and how documentary it is. But it opens on this wonderful. The opening is very interesting, and it doesn't. It seems kind of high tech compared to the rest of the film. There's sort of this graphic opening which looks like snow and storm falling down on our screen, and it sort of becomes the Americas. It becomes this outline of North America and South America. And the title card eventually explains, you get some information, but the title card explains that in 1946, 50 beavers were introduced to Tierra del Fuego to establish a fur trade. But because there were no natural predators, the beavers just took over, and they denuded the island or part of it. I mean, I'm not that familiar with Tierra del Fuego. It's a large part of both Chile and Argentina.
Argentina, yeah.
And I don't know if it was just on one. I think they were just on one island within Tierra del Fuego, and it denuded this island. And now there's a population of 150,000 beavers. And the locals and the environment itself are pissed off. They are not happy. The sheep herder is mad. It makes it sound like there's only one sheep herder on the island. The penguin handler, and I don't know how you get that job, and I don't know what it pays, but I think it'd be pretty cool to do. But there's a penguin handler. He's mad because the birds have no vegetation or cover for shelter because the beavers have just eaten everything and changed the direction of rivers and put dams everywhere. There's this fantastic eerie atmospheric music, and the landscapes themselves are also very eerie and atmospheric, and it makes the viewer think this is a horror film. And at moments there are these inclinations towards horror, and I think that's appropriate. It's really interesting. It's not quite a horror film, and it's not quite a horrible film either. But I ask you the question. How many wildlife biologists will the herds for beavers cull? Or how many beavers will the wildlife biologists murder and dissect? How many beavers? Yeah. The herds of beavers could cull these people. So it's almost like the beavers are so dangerous that they could kill the people. I think that's almost, and they sort of are. I mean, I think there's a big metaphor in there and an environmental message in here, but I don't want to spoil anything too soon, but I would have, the last film could have used fewer beavers. This film might have needed more beavers. 60 would have been good. I think you're right. 60 beavers.
It's the classic kind of Jaws trick, isn't it? That the beavers just don't really appear, especially for the first 2/3 of the film.
Yeah.
So you go a long way before you see a beaver, and there's this kind of big build-up, isn't it? And you see the environment affected by the beavers, and you see the dams and the tree stumps and the dead branches.
Yeah.
And you go a long way before you eventually see a beaver.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I wrote here in my notes, which is just this is a film of mirrors, isn't it? It's mirrors within mirrors. I remember when we were at film school, we had a whole kind of section on documentaries, and there was that kind of big filmmaker's question, or like the filmmaker's joke maybe, which is, what is the difference between a documentary and a fiction film? Nothing. That's how I felt at the end of this film. I think this film is a very kind of internally reflective, tricksy, curious film. It's a film within a film, because we have these two biologists who are supposedly they're writing a thesis and they're investigating the beavers, but also it's their job kind of to cull the beavers. Yeah. And they do interviews with locals, but then also we get footage of them conducting the interviews. So we see a little bit of their shaky video cam footage, but then also we see this lovely clear 35mm or HD or whatever footage of them shooting their shaky video cam footage. And you start to think, well, wait a second, what is real and what is not? Is this really happening or is it not? Are these guys actors? Are they real biologists? Yeah. Are they seem to be lovers, but are they real lovers? Are they pretending? Yeah. What's the whole thing? It's like is mysteries within mysteries, and it kind of really drew me in. I think it's clever and surprising and sort of existential. I was surprised at how much I got out of this movie.
And it's an hour and 6 minutes, so it's definitely not too long. And I wouldn't say that it's not long enough. I guess it's right where it needs to be, probably. But you also early on, I think that they wrong foot you so many times because there are moments where I thought, like this massive like radioactive beaver is just going to jump out and start killing people, which doesn't happen. But there are also these moments because the better quality film that Molina and Luco make is, it feels like someone's watching them sometimes. So you get that horror film idea of, okay, so if someone's watching them, they're going to do them harm at some point. And that kind of wrong foots you as well. And then, I don't think they were actors purely. I think they were biologists because they pull that beaver apart and start taking measurements pretty expertly as far as I could tell.
Yeah, it looks like real science, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there are films within films because they're definitely using their own footage at times. But then I guess there's someone else there at the time, or I don't know if they went back and recreated some stuff with better cameras and better gear. I have a lot of questions about it. I felt like I learned a lot, and at the same time, I didn't need more of it. Like the hour and 6 minutes is fine, and but it's not pure documentary. I don't think it's a Western, though. I mean, that is a weird.
But then there is quite a lot of shooting at wildlife, and there is kind of like a bit of suspense, and it's kind of man versus wilderness, isn't it? Yeah,
penguin herding, sheep herding. Yeah.
Yes, I think there are a lot of Western elements.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I was trying to figure out, the main thesis of the film is just, I guess it's don't bet against nature, isn't it? I think is what it's trying to say. Early on, they interview one of the local residents, and he explains how, he's got a bunch of fox pelts, and he explains that on the island they introduced rabbits. But then the rabbits became a pest, so they introduced foxes to control the rabbits, and then the foxes became a pest. And now they've introduced beavers in the hope of having a fur trade. Yeah. But the fur trade died, and instead the beavers have become a pest. And so now they've introduced a pair of biologists to reduce the beaver numbers. Yeah. It's like this constant cycle, and the biologists are just another little element in that diagram. There's nothing kind of different about them. There's my favourite scene. It's made me laugh out loud. We see the biologists, is it Derek and Georgia?
Derek and Georgia, yep.
And they kind of live in this little caravan, and they're driving around, what looks like miles and miles away from anything. Yeah. But then they go into town. So this is shortly after they've had this quite traumatic experience of Derek has tried to kill a beaver caught in a trap. They set a whole bunch of traps. Yes. And a beaver is caught by one of them, but it's not killed, and so he tries to kill it, but he has his sniper rifle. Yeah. And he's shooting at this beaver that's trapped down a hole and can't kill it. And ends up digging up almost a whole field to try and find this beaver and kill it. And it's all kind of terribly distressing, really. Yeah. And they go into town to sort of get some R&R. And they go to a restaurant and they order steaks and burgers. And then outside the restaurant, there's some construction work going on. And there's a whole bunch of construction workers who just look exactly like beavers. Yeah. There's a guy who pokes his face up out of a hole. Yep. And it's not subtle, but I thought it was hilarious, really, that it's very clear that there is no difference between the beavers and the other mammals in the film, including the humans. We're all the blooming same. Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's juxtaposition, and that's like the heart
art of filmmaking in some ways. You're just showing these two sides of the same coin, we might say. It's this busy town. And we think of the beaver as being the engineer of the mammal world. I mean, they're out there building dams and rerouting rivers and all that. And then they do this brilliant thing of juxtaposing all the same thing. The humans are doing the same thing to the environment. They're working on infrastructure. They're working on the power lines and the roads, and they're modifying their environment just as much as the beavers are, if not much more. So then you immediately ask that question to yourself: which species is more out of control? Is it the beaver or is it the human? I mean, that's the environmental message. And in that same scene, that whole sequence is they're going into town. They also address these school children. And they're basically telling the school children, we have to start killing lots of beavers before they make it to Santiago and start eating up people's houses and killing people there, whatever. So it's just this wonderful juxtaposition of, we're doing the same thing as humans. And we're just mad because they're doing it. They're not doing what we wanted them to do, I guess. That's what the thing is of the beavers, right? They were supposed to be there so that they could kill them and turn them into hats and coats or whatever. And now they've just denuded the island. So it's similar to the Hundreds of Beavers, too, in the sense that you see the destruction that they can do, but at the same time, we're kind of doing our own destruction as well. So
Yep. Should we ring the spoiler bell, do you think?
I guess we can ring it a little bit more.
We can probably ring it, because I'm going to talk about something at the end of the movie. Okay. So I'd feel guilty if I didn't ring the bell. We'll ring the bell. Here it is. Here's the bell. So you get to the very end of the film, and I had to look up Tierra del Fuego on Wikipedia at the end of the movie, because I don't think this information is contained in the film. At the end of the film, they explain that there are now, they estimate 150,000 beavers on Tierra del Fuego. Do you know how many people live on Tierra del Fuego?
I'd say 50 or 60,000.
Yeah, it's 135,000.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it's exactly the same number.
They're outnumbered.
Give or take.
No wonder they're
humans
freaking
are
out.
Very slightly outnumbered. And then towards the end of the film, so these biologists who've been tasked with coming and finding out about the beavers and also trying to cull the beavers and try and turn the tide. They add up how many they've killed, and it's 72.
72.
And it seems like so incredibly fruitless.
It's a great
and at the same time, they have, as you said earlier, they have managed to shoot one beaver with about 20 bullets. Eventually, they do actually kill it. Yeah. And they do their scientific measurements, and they weigh it, and they tell you how long it is and how much of it is tail, and they cut out the mandible and put it in a bag, I guess, to send to the museum or something. I don't know. It's all strange. And then they eat the rest of it. Unbelievable.
Eating the beaver.
They cook the beaver and eat it. Apart from one of their buddies who kind of comes to see them in their caravan, and he leans in through the window and he starts eating raw beaver.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you spotted this, at the very end of the movie there is a dedication, and the movie is in memory of Neil, who is the guy who was eating raw beaver at the end of the movie. So I think if there is any message to take home from this movie, apart from the fact that we need to seriously ask questions about which is the most destructive mammal, the other lesson to be learned is don't eat raw beaver.
Don't eat
frankly.
the raw beaver. Well, I think Neil is the penguin wrangler, the penguin.
Is that
handler.
right?
I think so. Yeah. So again, you might wonder: is that true or is that a joke? That's how much this film plays with your mind, I think, is that maybe he didn't die. They just said that because, well, he was eating raw beaver. Maybe they're trying to they're trying to do a public service by encouraging people not to eat raw beaver. But honestly, that's probably what needs to happen in Tierra del Fuego. If you need to get rid of the beavers, you need to start killing them and selling them in the markets and eating them to do your part.
I can see the posters now, yeah.
It came back to me as a horror film late. Because the last few images are, there's just this beaver. He's in the bush eating stuff. He sort of slips into the night. And the last image of this film is you're above the community. It's like this looming shot over this community at night. And there are these beavers out there in the night doing their thing, and it's okay, this is a horror film. This is sort of an environmental horror film on one level. It's super subtle, of course, but that's definitely a message that they're sending.
It has that kind of alien vibe, doesn't it? Insofar as here is a monster which is of our own making.
Yeah.
It borrows a lot of those horror tropes, doesn't it? The same with this kind of, that sort of the echoing guitar, this kind of minimal music. And there are some lovely jump cuts in this film as well. I think it's cleverly, wittily edited.
Yeah.
For what is clearly a pretty zero-budget documentary movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of impressive craft on display here. It's a really terrific piece of work.
Yeah. But so I guess that part of the discussion for me is like, what was there any direction? There's sort of, there's a hint of a love story there, but they are partners and they're biologists, but we don't know if they're, playing themselves or if it's just a documentary. I just don't, those things I don't know. Like what would have been written, I guess.
They feel more like actors to me, even the way that they're both kind of really hirsute, aren't they? And the film kind of really lingers on the beaver fur. There's a woman in a museum who's got these kind of stuffed beavers, and she's bringing out and explaining how after they kill the beaver, they have to shampoo it to get the fur really nice, and then they sort of stuff it.
Yeah.
And I think the biologists they've chosen, they even kind of look a bit like beavers, which is not an insulting thing to say, but I think it feels deliberate to me. I think it's really kind of treading that line. At least it's filmmaking which is so skillful that it allows you to ask that question: is this real or is this not? Either is plausible.
Do you think there was any scripted scene in there? I was trying to think of what one of these scenes would have been scripted, and the one that came to me was the schoolyard, because I didn't pay enough attention. I was wondering if not the schoolyard, but the school presentation. Right. I don't know if we ever saw the kids and Giorgio and Derek in the same shot. Like you were cutting back and forth. So it almost felt like that could have been done where they're sitting in front of a blackboard and then the kids are in some other school and shot in some other way at some other time. And they just put those two images together, juxtapose them so that we think it's one scene and they're actually making that presentation. But I was not absolutely convinced, and I can't think back clearly enough to say, oh, that was one scene or they put that together.
There's one other scene which strikes me that could well be scripted, which is that they I think in like the first interview or one of the first interviews with the local population, they're talking to the guy who I think maybe he's the sheep farmer, and he's sitting in his living room in like this armchair which is directly kind of in front of the fire with the back to the fire, and it looks it's a very weird setup in his living room, and clearly I'm guessing they've moved all the furniture around for the sake of the movie. And they ask him a series of questions. They say, we just need a yes or no answer to all of these questions, and they ask him all these questions about how much the beavers have affected his life, and his answer to every question is no. It's like, have the beavers done this? No. Have the beavers done this? No. It's like he's not able to. He offers one maybe, but otherwise every question is a no, and it's kind of, it seems so hilarious. You start to think, is this set up? Is this a sketch?
There's stuff to think about on this film, and as I said, I feel so misguided, so wrong-footed throughout the film that I don't know what to believe and what not. But I definitely learned a lot about beavers, but also certainly about just this sort of obtuse filmmaking it's just not really telling a clear story, but it really lets the viewer take things away from it.
Yes,
in a short time.
Tremendously skillful, very interesting. It's real brain food. This film. I think terrific piece of work. Well, we seem to have seen an awful lot of beavers, or the effects of beavers, or the results of beavers, or the future of beavers. But despite all of those beavers, I'm still going to force you to play my normal game. Having watched two films, which is 2,000 beavers and virtually no humans. But out of all those people on screen, who were you?
Who am I?
Or do you mean, which beaver am I?
Which beaver am I? Beaver number 56.
I feel a little bit like Bob Dylan this week, actually.
He's in next week's film.
That's right. We'll get there later, I guess. I felt Derek.
Oh,
Derek. He's the wildlife biologist in Beaverland, a ukulele player. He's a little reluctant to kill the rodents, but at the same time, I think he enjoys doing it, which is that's my approach with the mice. It's not. It doesn't give me great pleasure, but it's my version of hunting. You know, like other guys pick up guns and actually hit larger mammals. I'm a mice guy. And yes, and it was interesting in the that comes up in Beaverland, doesn't it? They brought the foxes in, and then almost one of the characters says almost proudly, "We don't have any mice on this island," because the foxes did a great number on the mice, maybe not such on the rabbits. And at one point I thought, oh, the foxes are going to try and take the beavers too, like that's their solution to the beavers. But beavers are big.
They're big, aren't they?
Yes. I mean, I think they're 40 pounds, so like 20-something kilograms.
Yeah.
That's
a brave fox
animal.
to take on one of those.
Yeah. But I liked Eric. It was interesting. It looked like he might have had one English-speaking parent or something like that, spoke English quite well. And then there was another guy who was definitely an English speaker who'd been living down there trapping animals forever or whatnot. And his Spanish was very heavily anglicized, I guess. So there were some interesting characters, but... penguin handler again. I love that job, but that's not who I was this week. I was Derek, I think. How about you?
Well, so I got to the end of the films this week, and I was asking myself, do I ever sometimes feel like I am beset by angry beasts on every side, facing impossible odds, working in hostile conditions?
Yes.
And faced with my own stupid failure to plan for every eventuality, because that feels like me. So I very much feel like Jean Kayak this week. But I think again the way that film is supposed to work is that we, the audience, are supposed to be Jean Kayak, I guess.
Yep.
So all I'm doing is responding to the very basic function of the film. But I did come away feeling. They're there, but for his very impressive figure when he takes his shirt off. There goes me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would be quite as resourceful if I was stranded in the Wisconsin snowscape, though.
No. Well, and in our defense, there are not a lot of characters to choose from this time.
Yes.
Certainly not a lot of reliable ones.
Yep. I can't pole dance and I can't use a spittoon, so I got to be Jean Kayak. Okay, well, 2 movies. I wonder whether we can find any common ground between them. We'll do our synthesis, see if we can sort of draw them together.
Beavers. They're both about beavers.
Incredible. You spot that on your own. That's amazing.
Yes, I'm glad I got that one in fast because I get credit for that one.
I mean, these films are very, very different in tone, madcat comedy and kind of horror documentary. Yeah. But I think they are basically more or less the same story.
Yeah.
Aren't they? I think they're both man versus nature, and they're both kind of suggesting that predator and prey are, kind of the same.
Yeah.
I think if you take home any central message from Hundreds of Beavers, it is that nature is too big to take on and expect to win.
Yeah. Yep.
And Beaverland says basically exactly the same thing. So I think these movies are very congruent.
I think it's too big to win, but we are acting these days like there's an environmental message, I think, in both, which is important. Like we certainly are trying to take over nature, it seems like, and I think there's another underlying message that's not a good idea. And for me, like toying with nature is a theme in both films, and it doesn't go well generally in either film. It definitely doesn't go well in Beaverland. Hundreds of Beavers, it's made to that he can overcome all the beavers, and he does win out in the end. He gets I don't know if we even mentioned, he gets enough money to get the wedding ring and marry the pole dancing daughter of the trading post owner. So I think there's an environmental message, I think, in both. I mean, just seeing that landscape in Tierra del Fuego in Beaverland, it's heartbreaking. And but this is an animal that is just doing what it does, right? Like it was just foolish to bring them from Canada in the first place. Literally from one end of the hemisphere down to the other end of the hemisphere. And you just know you're doing something wrong. But in 1946, they thought, oh, that's a great idea.
It's interesting that these two stories are more than 100 years apart, aren't they? and yet in both of them, basically, our stewardship of the natural environment is poor.
Yeah.
But and in fact, we are kind of in a worse position now than we were in the 19th century, which is presumably when Hundreds of Beavers was set.
Yeah.
I was reading this week that apparently this year, so 2025, we are a quarter of the way through the new century.
Yeah.
We are apparently going to burn more coal this year than any year in history.
Oh, no. Wow.
So we still can't get it right. We are busy building data centers to run AI that will be so power draining they will need their own power supplies.
Yeah.
We are frantically changing the climate. I mean, I tell you what, this week I definitely learned why beavering is synonymous for industriousness.
Yeah.
Because those beavers, just watching them in Beaverland, watching them build a dam, these guys work hard, aren't they? Haul in logs. I mean, they are very hardworking creatures, and we are kind of doing the same thing, but in the wrong direction. We are changing the climate and changing it faster than ever.
Yeah.
And this year, apparently the plan is to drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill. Yeah, more drilling, more oil.
So will we ever learn? Doesn't look like it.
No. And that's why I think they're both horror films to a certain extent. And I like that.
Oh, yes.
I like that aspect. But you're also right. Like Derek, he undoes a dam in Beaverland at one point. He takes it apart and then sets up this nighttime camera so that they can see what happens. And yeah, sure enough, Beaver comes back in no time and he starts rebuilding the dam. And they are very industrious. And, it looks like they're doing something really very human in some ways. They're just damming up a river the way we do. But it has disastrous effects for the environment down there. So there's a horror story.
Obviously, when humans build dams, we don't have disastrous effects on the environment, not at all.
Exactly, yeah. So I think they both definitely address that in horrifying ways. And I mean, honestly, we see in Hundreds of Beavers, the beavers are building a dam as well. I mean, of course, they're guys in costumes taking around cardboard logs or something like that. But they do show that sort of industriousness in Hundreds of Beavers also.
We don't watch many horror movies on the podcast, and yet unwittingly, somehow, we've managed to watch 2 this week.
Yeah. There's one other thing that it's kind of silly to mention, but I also think neither one of these films is a great film. And they have that in common, but they're both good, and they both really accomplish really tremendous things. I mean, just visually, Hundreds of Beavers is a knockout. It's just a great film to look at. And I think just all of the mystery and intrigue in Beaverland in such a laid back documentary type film, it's quite an accomplishment. So I'm not going to go out and say, hey, everybody in the Two Reel Cinema Club, go watch these films, because I'm not sure that that's great advice, but they both are interesting films, and you learn something either about filmmaking or about beavers in these films. So while I don't think they're like 5-star films by any means, they're both they both have their own value.
Yeah. It's all right not to be good.
Yeah.
If you can be interesting.
Exactly. There's the message. Thank you.
Well, we just have enough time to talk about what else has been playing at this theatre. So we've just had Christmas. So we've had a bit of time off, seen loads of films in our house, but I'm only going to talk about one, as there are limited screens available at the Two Reel Cinema Club. So I'm only going to talk about one of them. The film I'm going to talk about is Tenet, the 2020 Christopher Nolan film, which I had never seen before.
2020, no.
I think it was like one of 2020's highest grossing movies, but it made like $350 million, something like that. It was a terrible, terrible time to release a film theatrically.
Wow.
I think it was his most expensive film, so it sort of lost money, but it was still like that year's biggest picture, I think. I had never seen it before, and on paper, I mean, I'm always interested to see a Christopher Nolan film. On paper, it's completely up my alley. It's a science fiction film about inverting entropy. Have you seen it?
No.
So it's a very cute idea. This notion that there's a way to send objects back through time, while the rest of us keep moving forward through time. And you see this like in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you start to think, oh, what if you send a person back through time? Oh, and time travel films are my kryptonite.
Yeah.
So on paper, this is right up my street, and overall, Tenet is an absolute mess. Yes. So I just think he has no idea how to use or explore this clever idea.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of set pieces, and it sort of lurches from one to another, and there are these very kind of dry, thin characters that are no fun to watch. And they leave you with no curiosity about what they're going to do next, or what they think, or what they want. It's just dreadful, actually. And I think the big problem is he can't write.
Yeah,
I think Christopher Nolan just can't write. Yeah. It's a cute idea. Supposedly he thought about the film for 10 years and spent 5 years writing it.
Wow.
And blooming out, wish he'd spent another 5 years. Should have put a bit more effort in. Really is terrible. His next film is The Odyssey.
Ooh.
And that's already got a cracking story written by Homer, who does know how to tell a story. So hopefully maybe I think he's got great visual sensibilities. I'm hoping maybe he'll use his visual sensibilities on a story that has actual characters and that is interesting and fun, and not just a series of explosions and car chases and bungee jumps, which is what Tenet is. So yes, what a disappointment. Very poor.
Well, I was going to ask, what's Homer's last name? If you say he's such a great writer.
I was so tempted to say Simpson now, but it's not, is it?
I remember hearing people talk about Homer when I was in high school. Thinking, okay, he's a great writer, but that's his name? He's got one name.
How do they know where to send the checks to?
Yeah. I watched a lot of stuff, actually. I liked the Ken Burns and Sarah Burns documentary on Leonardo da Vinci that's playing on public television here, or streaming. And
I so thought you were going to say Leonardo DiCaprio then.
No, Leonardo it starts out the same, doesn't it? Totally different guy, though. Very interesting documentary, so that's good. That's a thumbs up. I followed your lead. Christmas tradition, we watched Die Hard. Oh! And I think it was the first time I'd seen it, sort of, not in one sitting. I saw it, but it's the first time I've seen it actually chronologically from beginning to end. And that was a great way to see it finally. So enjoyed that. A lot of long-haired German guys who just made me giggle a little bit, but good film, good action, and it's a really tight story, of course. So that was fun. I saw Complete Unknown. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I think we're doing that. We haven't announced that yet. But 2 Real Cinema Club members, go see it. Even if you're not a Dylan fan, just go see it. Yesterday, I saw Oh, Canada. You and I both have ties to Canada. So this is the new Paul Schrader film. The writer of Taxi Driver.
Yeah, is he still working?
Based on this film, I would say no. You mean, like, is he still functioning? Richard Gere, Uma Thurman. It's a mess. It's too bad. Yeah.
When you summarize it there, it does sound like a film that was made in 1992. Is it really just been made now?
Yeah, it's just very odd. There's some very questionable decisions in terms of characters appearing in certain scenes and at what age they are when they're touching a younger woman's belly and such. But, brutal. It's about a filmmaker who's near death, and like his memory. They're doing a documentary about him, so that's not a particularly original idea either. And then his memory is not very reliable. So is he telling the truth story about his life, or is he making it up? And it kind of pairs well with A Complete Unknown, which we'll talk about, and Beaverland in the sense that you don't really know what's true and what's not. And I don't think he should be making films anymore. And guess what? None of it was filmed in Canada, even though it takes place in Montreal, which is funny because people usually go to Canada to make films because it's cheaper. And then
Canada doubles for everywhere for tax reasons.
Yeah, so it takes place there. It was really, really not good. So please don't see that. Go to Canada, give them some tourist dollars, but please don't see O Canada. I took one for the team there.
Do you think maybe there was a misprint on the poster, and it should be called No Canada?
That is a good one. You haven't seen the film, so you don't even know how good that is. That could be the entire review for the film.
On Instagram, we are at Two Real Cinema Club. You can read the blog at tworealcinemaclub.com, comment on our YouTube channel, or email us at tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Next time. See, we should have rung the spoiler bell. You've already given it away. Next time, we are going to be watching...
I'm so excited. A Complete Unknown, which is the Bob Dylan film featuring Timothée Chalamet. Edward Norton is also in the film. We're pairing it with the D.A. Pennebecker film Don't Look Back, which is a 1967, did we decide?
The real Bob Dylan,
Yeah,
yes.
the real Bob Dylan. I think it's just going to be... For me, this is just... this is my wheelhouse. I've been listening to nothing but Bob Dylan for almost 2 weeks now. I won't listen to anything else. So I'm in the mood. I hope you guys are. Even if you're not Dylan fans, I think it's going to be a great podcast, and we're going to love these films.
Oh, looking forward to it. Can't wait. Yeah. Right. A Complete Unknown next time. Next week, we're going to be hanging out at the popcorn counter. This is the other thing I'm really looking forward to. In fact, next week is the podcast I've spent a whole year looking forward to. It is the Film of the Year podcast.
Oh, my God.
So we will be getting a march on the Oscars. Tune in for the proper hot tips about what's going to really win the important awards this year.
Yeah.
As we will be giving out our own gongs at the popcorn counter. Two Real Cinema Club Film of the Year podcast. Can't wait for that. Very excited, genuinely excited.
I'm very excited for that. Yes.
Until then, so maybe see Hundreds of Beavers if you get the chance. Check out the Bob Dylan film before we see it. We will see you next week with a review of the year. Thanks for joining us as always. Until next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
So hello and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Ruzika.
And I'm...
Do you want to go again?
Yeah, I think you have to. I don't think there's any choice. We cannot continue like this.
We can't go on like this.